Today we kick off a new sermon series, as you just saw, called Anxiety. I don't know how many of you have wrestled with this thing, but I have. And today we're kicking this sermon series off really on a topic that many people deal with, I believe. But most honestly, they suffer in silence, simply because they are afraid of what pulling the trigger on such a confession might cause people to think of them in the moment. Statistics on ADAA.org reported that anxiety and depression is the most common mental illness among adults ages 18 and up. Get this, with a reported 40 million people dealing with it. 40 million people. In another article found on GoodRx posted online on February 21st of this year, it reported that 1 in 10 prescriptions filled in 48 states were for anxiety and depression medication. But the thing that I found most shocking was that in 2010, reports from the IMS Health Report showed that Americans in 2010 alone had spent $11.6 billion on antidepressants. And I was one of them. That is when everything started hitting for me, was in 2010. Sitting on the off-white examining table, I could hear the doctor talking to me, but I had no clue what she was saying. I was just honestly trying to not throw up or pass out in the moments. It was an emergency visit, and honestly one of many that month. I had been several times because I just didn't know what was going on. As weird as it is, I honestly thought I was dying or something. I wondered, is it a heart attack? Is it an asthma attack? Is it an allergic reaction? Was it all of them? That would be my luck. Just all of them hit at the same time. All I knew was that I didn't know what was going on, and the fear of that reality was paralyzing me. Any of you ever been there? Struggling with what was going on, not knowing exactly how to even vocalize what it is that's going on in your life? Every test showed that I was fine, but the question to me was, why don't I feel fine? I know the doctor keeps telling me, you're perfectly fine. And you know how annoying it is to go in them to tell you, dude, you're perfectly fine. You feel like you are absolutely losing your mind. Through the chaos of worry, I hear my name, Adam. I think you are having a panic attack. It took me a while to process what the doctor was saying. There was one word that came out of my mind when she said that, and it computed, how? How does this happen? The next thing I knew, I am holding a piece of paper with this word spelled, Paxil. Paxil. I began to look it up, and it helps with depression and anxiety, my doctor said. I could only look at her and go, depression, anxiety. But I'm not depressed. I'm certainly anxious. That's why I'm here. But depressed, I don't think that I'm depressed. No way am I depressed in this scenario, as nice as she could be. She looks at me and says, honey, depression and anxiety seem to go hand in hand most of the time. So I began to wonder through everything that was going on, is this why I was finding it hard to get out of bed in the morning? Was this why I couldn't sleep and insomnia was taking over my nights? Was it why I found myself having a hard time being in crowds and having to just leave to find relief from the panic that was setting in? And to top it off, was this why what was going on when I often had to leave Sunday morning service in the hand of my associate pastor literally 5 minutes before service would start because I felt sick to my stomach and was having difficulty breathing, and the only way to normalize it and to get rid of it was to leave. You know how shameful and ridiculous it is to watch as your church watches you leave because you can't keep it together? It happened for months to me. At this point, holding the prescription, I didn't care. I would take anything to get rid of this feeling. It's not fun falling apart. It's not fun being able to live. It's not fun being scared of everything for no apparent reason. It was not fun. So I'll take whatever it can do to not make me feel that way. And there's some of you that know exactly what I'm talking about. Paxil would become my new best friend. We hung out every morning for a drink of water. And there was this question: how long will I be on this? I remember asking the doctor that, and you know what they said? I don't know. That doesn't help me. This is the rest of my life? Could be. Within a few short weeks, I was different. In fact, even today, if you would ask my wife when I take it, she knows when I'm on it. I'm different. The good news, I didn't have panic attacks anymore. Right? I wasn't having that. I wasn't having the extreme anxiety anymore. That was great. Now I was just numb. I was just numb to everything. I was emotionless. I like to call myself the chemical stoic. Stoic not by choice, but simply because of a pill. And I don't know which was worse, feelings that crippled me or numbness that made me feel as if I wasn't even alive. In the moment, it was this dark dance between the two fighting over which one will lead and which one will follow. That was my life for quite some time. Even today, there's still a moment to where I'm dancing with it. Before I got up here, because of everything going on, I had to pop a pill. But sometimes it still gets me. Funny that I would start a topic on anxiety, and guess what I would deal with today? Anxiety. And the whole time there are these questions that I wrestle with. Maybe you've wrestled with them too. Do Christians deal with anxiety? Because I had been told that they didn't. That good Christians never dealt with mental illness, because to do so was to not trust God. After all, how are you trusting God when you have to take medication to help you not worry? And they were good questions. And how does a pastor out of everybody get anxiety? It's certainly not the club that I agreed to be in. It's not the one that I wanted to be in, but here I am, the spokesperson for it, I guess. How do I preach about a peace that surpasses all understanding when I have to take a pill just to make it through the day? These were the thoughts that kept permeating my mind, just bombarding it. I felt like a fraud, like I am losing my mind. I've always heard this. How many of you heard this? That the joy of the Lord is my strength. How many of you heard that verse? Why didn't it work for me? Do I not have enough joy? Is it not in the Lord? Like, what was wrong with me? You ever felt that way? Was it an indictment against my faith? Because I was memorizing scripture like crazy because people said that that would help me, but guess what? It didn't the way that I thought it should. At times, it made it worse because the enemy was always trying to use the same scripture against me sometimes. How do you feel when you open the Bible to find relief, but it just brings worse because the enemy twists around the words in your mind and you start thinking it's talking about you? I even had well-meaning believers tell me that I was sinning because I just was not trusting God. That would mess me up. Because I began to wonder, what if it's true? I was praying without ceasing for God to take it away, but I was angry when He left me to struggle with it. Why would you leave me to struggle with it? I am a pastor, for crying. God, just take it away. He didn't. And I wish I could tell you why. He's still silent on that one. God kept that one to Himself, and perhaps it's because maybe I did lack the right amount of faith. Maybe that is why. Or maybe He's trying to use my story to share it with someone else, that it's possible for God to use you even where you stand. I was tormented by Matthew 11:28, and here's what it says. Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Because the reality is, I wanted that rest that Jesus speaks of more than anything. But it always seemed to just slip through my fingers. Shame made me believe that it was all because I wasn't coming to Jesus correctly. What does it look like to come to Jesus like this? And the proof, at least in my mind, because that's the way the anxiety mind works, was that my anxiety was still a reality no matter how many times I thought I came to Jesus. Was I just not leaving it for Him? The truth is, and this is what I struggled with, is that it wasn't Jesus stopping my anxiety. It was Paxil. And I wrestled with that. And I would talk to people about my struggles with this anxiety thing, and a lot of them wouldn't really be listening, I noticed. They really wouldn't be listening to what I was saying. Instead, they were looking for ways to fix me. Don't you hate that? When really you just want someone to listen, but instead they decide, hey, well, have you heard this scripture? Yeah, I'm a pastor. I've studied it all. Yeah, but have you actually listened to it? You know, I would have some people send me the definition of anxiety, as if I didn't know what anxiety was. And here's the thing, I don't fault them, you know why? Because I've told you guys I'm a fixer. I would do the exact same thing. But being in the situation, it helped me understand people a little bit differently. When there's things that you're wrestling with and you don't know why it's happening, sometimes all I needed was a friend to be there and say, whatever's going on, I'm here. You're not alone in the struggle. Scripture was used in a way that honestly annoyed me. Not because I didn't love it or that I didn't use it, but because it was used as this type of magical potion for my broken soul. Just take one of these verses a day and you will be free from anxiety. But it never worked that way for me. Just quote or understand this scripture that was sent to me, and people acted like, boom, automatically I am healed, and that did not happen. To hear some people tell it, you would assume that no one in the Bible ever dealt with anxiety or depression or doubt, but I was shocked and honestly comforted when I found out that this wasn't true. Some of the greatest men and women of our faith struggled with the exact same things, the human experience that you and I deal with. This revelation by the Spirit would breathe life into my battered soul. I found that there was something powerful about this thing called solidarity. Solidarity. To realize that you are not alone in this struggle. You are not the only one that is going through this. There are 41 million other people in America alone that deal with the exact same thing, trying to figure out how you live life in this. That Elijah's story is my story. That Hannah's tears are my tears. That David's prayers in the Psalms are the same prayers that I pray and that you pray. Do you know their stories? If you don't, can I introduce them to your stories? Because I think it could help us here that may be ravaged by anxiety ourselves to understand. And here, let me preface it by this. This message may not be for you if you've never dealt with anxiety, and that's okay. Maybe you can use it for someone that you know that does. But for some of you that are in this band with me and we didn't sign up for this band, I want to help you. Job, he lost everything. His life falls apart in literal seconds. Doesn't even have enough time to catch his breath, he says. And at first, Job, you know what he does? He falls to the ground in worship. It is a testament to his worship and the depths of his relationship with God. But, and we all understand this, when answers don't come and his situation doesn't change and he grows weary of waiting, he writes Job 30, 16 through 17. And now my life ebbs away. Days of suffering grip me. Night pierces my bones. My gnawing pain never rests. It no longer sounds like someone worshiping, does it? It sounds like someone grieving. It sounds like someone in pain. It sounds like someone that's dealing with depression and not sure where God is in the moment. And sometimes that's what it looks like as a Christian, to grieve, holding on to God, having questions, having doubt, but still chasing after Him. Or how about Hannah? In 1 Samuel, she is one of the wives of a man named Elkanah. The issue is that while the other wife is providing children for him, Hannah is not. She is barren. She is unable to have children, which during these times was considered to be a curse from God. Her question is, God, why? Why would you do that to me? Hannah would take her pain, like so many of us, and her shame to the house of the Lord. And in 1 Samuel 1:8, we read that her husband notices her distress and asks this, Hannah, why are you weeping? Don't you love when people ask that? Why are you crying? My wife gets angry at me when I say that. Oh, why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? Does those questions sound familiar? Not eating, downhearted, weeping. Any of you been there? Scripture tells us that the prophet Eli would later hear her anguish as she begs God for a son, and it says that she was weeping bitterly. He isn't really sure what is going on, so you know what he does? He assumes that she is just drunk and rebukes her. But she isn't drunk. At 1 Samuel 1:15 through 16 says this, not so, my Lord. Hannah replied, I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. You ever been there? Just pouring out all of your emotion before God, hoping that He can do something with it because you've held it for too long and you can't do anything with it. Now, we know the story of Hannah. It ends on a happy note. Hannah ends up having a son, but that doesn't negate the very real emotion that resonates with us in her story. Because many of us find ourselves deeply troubled and praying out of great anguish and grief, even here today. Or how about Elijah? He's one that has always baffled me. How many of you have been baffled by Elijah? This great prophet, he dealt with it too. And his story is kind of a head scratcher for me. This man just defeated the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. God sent fire from heaven to the altar, and Israel repents and turns back to God, and he kills every single one of the Baal worshipers. It's like a barbarian movie. It's a story for the ages, and one that you would certainly think would make this man unbreakable. To see God move in that kind of situation, to see God have your back like that, you would think like you would be on cloud nine. Nobody should be able to touch you. That isn't what happens in the story. The story ends up taking a dark turn as Queen Jezebel sends a message that would alter Elijah's whole worldview at this point. that by tomorrow she is promising that she's going to kill him. Now you would think a man like this would go like, bring it on. He doesn't. Fear grips him and he runs away into the wilderness and crumbles under a broom tree. Get this, praying that he might die. What? When I read that, I go, what's wrong with Elijah? What's wrong with this man? What a sissy. Just call down fire from heaven again. Maybe you'll hit her there. He runs. He is scared to death. He is now crumbled, praying out to God to just take his life. 1 Kings 19, 4 through 5 says this, I have had enough. Have you ever said that? I've had enough, God. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. You know what I realize sometimes with my anxiety is that sometimes the best thing for me is just a nap. And this is how God meets Elijah. Gives him food and allows him to sleep. Now what I see from this account is interesting. Did you catch it? Elijah was afraid. Anxiety. He says, I have had enough. Depression. He runs for his life. Paranoia. And then he screams out, take my life. You know what we see there? He is on the verge of suicide. These are real things that real people just like you and I that love God with all of their heart deal with. They do. They deal with these things. You see it all over Scripture. Elijah was one of the greatest prophets of Israel, but he got to a point where he was so low, so depressed, that we see him crumble. And the only thing that he can pray is for death. What's going on, Elijah? We see this type of emotion all over a collection of poetry and lyrics in a book called Psalms. It has been called the anatomy of the soul because of all of its emotion. It gives a full range of human emotions and makes no apologies for it. It is raw and honest with every single human emotion on display, with each author trying to follow and worship God faithfully through all of those emotions. And when we read it, if I'm honest, even like today, there's a little tension because it makes us feel a little uncomfortable, doesn't it? Especially since we come from a worldview where emotions are the enemy and we are taught it is better to numb them than to feel them. Most of us are never taught how to deal with our emotions. We're just taught to stuff them down. Men for years have been told, hey, bottle that beast up. Don't you ever show emotion. So you're hard. You can't talk to anybody about why the craziness is going on, why there's so much chaos in your life, because we have been conditioned to think that men can't share things. Like I've said, it gets uncomfortable. And though it does have many authors, say what again? Well, it's off the top of the head. It's not in the notes. Sorry, next time. No, yeah. Thank you. And it can tend to make us uncomfortable. And though it does have many authors, one was not only a hero to Israel, but also a beloved king. King David wrote roughly 2/3 of the Psalms. Someone considered, get this, a man after God's own heart. A man after God. But here's what he wrote in Psalm 6. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am faint. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord? How long? I am worn out from my groaning. All night long I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow. That's a man after God's own heart. I have long suspected that King David could have suffered from bipolar disorder, mostly because his Psalms read like it. His emotions seem to change literally on a dime. One minute he is worn out from his groaning, and the next he is praising God. Now, I am not bringing all of these people and their situations up just to make it super depressing here this morning, even though it kind of feels that way. I'm bringing them up for you so that way that maybe you can have a breath of fresh air. Maybe for the first time in a long time that you can kind of inhale and exhale and have just a little bit of relief today. No, I am showing you them so that you will know that you are not alone. That scripture is full of people just like you who, for some reason, maybe it's because something happened in your life and it shattered you, and you're still trying to pick up the pieces. Maybe there's some trauma that's been done that you just haven't even had a chance to process. And how do you process something that you don't want to go back to? How do you even talk about that? So much easier just to not. Let's talk about the overwork that some of you put yourself through all the time, and you are breaking down, but you can't say anything about it. Because to do so is to show weakness, and that's what you've been told your entire life. How about the fact that some of you can't sleep at night and it keeps you up all night, and because you're up all night, you have this insomnia and you worry about every little thing that happens in your life, and you wake up dead tired and you do it all again the next day. So it's been months since you've had a good proper rest, and now you're breaking down emotionally, mentally. You're not capable of really keeping on with what you're doing, and it's going to catch you. All of us are there sometimes dealing with it, and then we wonder why it's impacting us like it is. Did you know that even Jesus wept? Did you know that? That even Jesus showed emotion? You know what? Sometimes I think that's the problem that we kind of have of Jesus, don't we? Is that we think like he's a stoic, just God-like, and he's certainly God, but like someone that has no emotion whatsoever. Like he doesn't laugh, doesn't crack jokes. He's just serious all the time, just looking for people to smite. Just better not laugh today. I don't know. This can't survive lightning strikes. We think that about God. But when I see Jesus, I see the fully human aspect of him. Yeah, the whole God aspect is there as well, but you see the human aspect. That scripture made it important for us to see that Jesus wept. It is the shortest verse in the entire Bible. Jesus wept. When he comes face to face with Lazarus, one of his best friends, dead body, we are told that he was deeply moved. This word for Jesus wept is meant to be understood to weep violently in the original language. To weep violently. Could you imagine seeing Jesus weep violently? Completely losing it over a friend that he loved, weeping violently. In other words, he is torn up inside. The God who defeated death, hell, and the grave weeps violently over someone that he loves. That is powerful, friends. He grieves. He feels it. What you feel, he feels. I would love to tell you that today, that you will walk out of here after hearing the message completely healed of any anxiety, depression, or doubt, or trauma that you have. And maybe you will. I believe in miracles. But the other reality is that may not happen either. If anything, I pray that this message helps bring some fresh air to know that you are not alone in the struggle, because I think the journey, at least for me, with anxiety and depression looks a lot like the woman with the issue of blood. And I know you've probably never thought about it this way, but I've been thinking about it this way because this is the only way that I can describe it. You see, for her, this wasn't just an issue that she had for a day. It was an issue that she had for 12 years. 12 years. Just bleeding out. Frustrated by her condition and worn out from her pursuit to fix it. The fact is, for this woman, she has done everything in her power to fix it. You ever been there where you've done everything that you can to try to fix it, but it's not enough? Spending every dime she had on doctors to find a cure, taking every prescription medication you can find to just calm you down, and then you don't like it because of the way it makes you feel, so give me something else. Give me something else to just make me normal. That's what she wants, is just to be normal. But it doesn't work. She still bleeds. She's broke, and it's not just monetarily that she's broke within her soul. Being brought to a place of complete desperation because she has nothing. And this, my friends, is a place of testing. Because it's a place that reveals the depth of her worship. Here's a question for you today. Can you still chase after Jesus while you're still bleeding? Can you still chase after Jesus while you're still bleeding? While you're still in pain? When you haven't got the healing that you want, can you still chase after Jesus? Because for me, that has been the journey. When you've tried everything to fix it, but it still hasn't worked. And for this woman, she comes after Jesus anyway. Still bleeding. Doesn't have what she's looking for. Still chasing Jesus anyway. Just pushing through the crowd. It's not going to stop her. Pushing through the fear. She's lived in fear long enough. That's not going to stop her. Pushing through the uncertainty. There's always going to be uncertainty. So she pushes through. And it's here that I want to highlight the story for you. Because most of us automatically go to the end of the story because we know that she gets healed at the end. But I don't want you to go there yet. I want to highlight the pursuit. It's easy to know the end of the story, but you've got to understand the pursuit to really have an understanding of the story. It's in the pursuit that you see how far you're willing to chase after God. It's in the pursuit that you realize that the pursuit is worth it, even if you come bleeding, even if you come uncertain, even if you come fear and anxiety-ridden and depressed. The pursuit to Jesus is worth it. Because in the pursuit, all she has is faith. All she really has is just a possibility. She only believes that she can be healed, but she doesn't possess the healing in the moment. So she walks after Jesus without having anything and not having anything promised. Just trust. And as I say, that's where a lot of us are. And it may not be anxiety, it may not be depression, it may be something else. You may have a medical condition going on right now that you're in a place to where you just need to trust Him. The healing hasn't come. You beg God every single night. You're growing weary and tired and you're just wanting God to end this situation. But He doesn't yet. And I can't tell you why. But what I can tell you is keep pushing. Keep pushing through. Keep going after Him. Because it's where a lot of us are. Chasing after God, believing that He can heal, but not possessing the healing. Some of us are just like Paul, aren't we? Where he begged God to remove the thorn in his flesh, but God left it for him to deal with. I hate that verse. I do. I'm like, it couldn't have ended on a happier note. Here's the thing I want to tell you. If God would do that to Paul, what makes you think it couldn't happen to you? Can you trust God in the moments he says, nah, I can't do that? I'm better than I used to be with anxiety. But every once in a while, it'll flare up like a nightmare. And I can't tell you why. And that's when I cling on to him. He tells Paul in 2 Corinthians 12:9, my grace is sufficient for you. Do you believe that here this morning? Because for some of you, you need to learn that. You need to learn that in the difficult moments. You need to learn that in the depressed moments. You need to learn that in the anxious moments. You need to learn that in the no moments, that his grace is sufficient for you. Why? Because his power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, he says this, maybe this is where we need to learn. Maybe this is where I need to learn to be. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness so that Christ's power may rest on me. I'm going to personalize it. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my anxiety and depression so that Christ's power may rest on me. See, maybe our journey with anxiety, depression looks more like this. Can I have the band please come up as we get ready to close out? Maybe it looks more like chasing after Jesus anyway. Allowing God's power to be made perfect in weakness. You see, because the biggest takeaway that I want to encourage you with today is that you are not alone. You have a crazy pastor up here that would understand everything you say about anxiety and depression. I want everybody to look at me. Look at me here. Look at me here. This is important. God has not abandoned any of you. He hasn't abandoned any of you. The fact that you're still here shows that he has not abandoned you. I'm not saying it's not tough. I'm not saying there's not moments to where it feels like it. I'm just telling you, I have to remind you sometimes, he is still here. He is still right there with you. He is just a call away. But I challenge you to keep chasing after him. Because faith isn't about chasing after Jesus to get what you want out of him. It's about trusting him regardless if anything comes out of it that you want. A lot of times we are looking for a magical process that guarantees our healing. If you ever find it, let me know. We can become multimillionaires. But it does not exist. A lot of times we believe that while there is healing, I also want to prepare you for when God may say to you that my power is made perfect in weakness. Why is this a problem? It's a problem because I don't like to be weak. It's a problem because you don't like to be weak. When I am breaking down emotionally, it doesn't make me look strong. And as a man, I do not like to not look strong. But here we are. Someone else is just going. And while I believe there is healing, I just want to prepare you that it may not always come the way that you would like. Because that's where I am. Certainly I'm better than I used to be, but I still deal with anxiety and depression. And God has used my weakness to proclaim his goodness even amongst you today. I choose to chase after him daily, even though I don't completely have my full healing, but I trust that he'll bring it. What about you? Today, I want to close with the song that we kind of ended worship with, He is Exalted. And I did that on purpose. You know why? Because when you have anxious thoughts and when you're dealing with depression and anxiety, there are voices in your head that try to tell you He's not exalted. So sometimes you have to tell them to shut up and you have to worship Him anyway. This is a way that I just want you to respond if you're dealing with it, by letting Him know, I'm still chasing after you.